came, a bright smile appeared on their faces. The world was filled with new happiness. For John, it is a joy to wake up and see familiar faces in front of him. His smile begins to shine better than any star in the sky. But still, this does not make his condition better. He needs to ask for help just to get up. But still, no one will refuse him here. John's gaze became clearer. He stopped being so empty and drooping, and finally you can expect an answer from him. He touched his face and wondered why his face was so dirty, as if he were with his little son who had gotten dirty in the sandbox. John's behavior was just as strange. For some reason, he cared so much about Clint. John noticed the parasite passenger sitting nearby, whom Clint had left alone while the hero was in oblivion. Clint did not like the way John behaved. In his behavior, he saw excessive concern, as if he was not of a traditional orientation. John couldn't stop praising him for working so hard to keep things in order. Clint began to become cocky in response to John's affections, since, in his opinion, he was vile. He explains everything by saying that he was obliged to do so. If everything had been different, Clint threw overboard all the unnecessary ones. John remained silent. He beat every rebel. Every single one of them got what they deserved. Everyone got a couple of bruises and bruises. Clint pointed out that John would never get the chance to save him again and appear so holy. Clint even judged him for caring about everyone but always forgetting about himself. John began his speech again, which should touch Clint to the core. He explains to him that even if he returned to the past, he would save him again. Even knowing that the arrow was poisoned and could kill him, he would expose his back to the blow. Clint stopped. John's words pierced him much deeper than that ill-fated arrow, and it remained deep in his heart. For Clint, this John's arrow was not in the back, but in the heart, and he took it into himself, be it medicine. He was captivated by these praises. He could not even finish the sentence as John bombarded him with compliments. John gets up and explains that Clint doesn't owe him anything because he's not just comrades, but friends. Clint protected John's little sister as well as Alice. This is what elevates him above everyone. This is why John considers Clint a true friend. Even when that wanderer attacked him, Clint did not leave his friend in danger. He went into battle with a stronger enemy and threatened him with an ordinary crossbow. Then Clint was the only one who came forward to help John. Clint was touched by John's words. Joy was visible in his eyes that he was praising him so much, praising his virtues. John sits up and lets Clint finally understand that all his good deeds mean that they both don't owe each other anything. John considers such signs of relationships to be characteristics of sincere friendship. Clint froze in one place. John's words struck him so much that he was petrified at that very second, as if he had been standing in the bitter cold for a very, very long time. Clint's mouth opened very wide. He did not understand how to react to such praise, since he had probably never heard such words from anyone. Here is Clint's real smile, full of joy and happiness. He finally heard what he so wanted to hear. He was very embarrassed, but continued to pretend that John's words sounded vile and disgusting. He did not stop praising him, but others reacted to this with their contemptuous silence. Alice was the most unhappy about this reunion. There was no joy in her face, only obvious disgust. What use was a blood-stained t-shirt for them, that their hands were shaking just from the mere sight of it? Clint's entire team couldn't even put on bloody clothes, but why did they need them? Sam wonders what is special about this clothing, why it was smeared with blood from the van. Clint listened to John again and ordered them to do as he told them, because if he said so, then it was certainly true. One of them decided to express his dissatisfaction and explained that under no circumstances could he even throw it on himself. John coolly pointed out that if they did not wear these things, they would meet death much earlier than fate predicted. They immediately became worried, because death is a bad joke, and John is even worse. John's decision is driven by the fact that the slime on his clothes will delay the transformation of those who ate the flesh of the dead earlier. John found a use for even this useless slime and rot that would save many lives. Michael and Sam looked at their clothes, realizing that it was pointless for John to deceive them, and they could trust him, but putting on such horror was beyond their strength. Is Tim really up to something again? His strange hum can only mean one thing, that a new thought has crept into his head, how to annoy John and Clint's entire team into the bargain. The shaved man and the whole gang reacted to their boss's grunt, and were also confident that he had come up with something again. Answering a question without even turning around suggests that Tim's insidious plan has begun to take effect. He wants to survive, although this is not strange for him, but there is a hidden intent in his words, since his methods of survival can reach the point of absurdity. Tim's gaze was more determined than ever. He was excited but also cool about everything and everyone. His feet stepped towards all the people and passengers to pick up his clothes. Something is not right in this van, but for sure a lot of rot, flesh, and blood. This whole mixture of everything kills the desire to approach it. Tim had already approached Sam. He tried to push him aside to get to the van. What happened to Tim? A minute ago, everything was normal with him, and suddenly his look changed. In his eyes, one could tell about everything that was bothering him. The capillaries swelled and painted the whiteness of his eyes blood red. The stench and filth, only this was reflected in the insides of the van. All the worst things gathered in one place. Tim was suddenly plunged into memories, as if his head were filled with old photographs, which prompted him to return to the past. In these memories, he was defeated in fencing. Whether his opponent was strong is known only to Tim. It is clear from his face that he is not happy about defeat. Otherwise, he was afraid of something. Defeat for him is not just one time. He will constantly remember it and torment himself. Everyone praised the winner. All this was a lot of pressure for Tim, since they are obliged to praise him, and not some winner. The stands rejoiced, as if their biggest bet, which they had placed on Tim's opponent, had won. They praised him and called him the most pleasant words. Only one was not happy with the outcome of the fight. He chuckled contemptuously in Tim's direction. The non-rejoicing fan turned out to be Tim's father, and it was he who brought him the greatest fear. Defeat frightened Tim, since his father's reaction would be too cruel. The father got up from his seat and went in his direction. There was nothing holding him here anymore. His cruelty was too extensive. Even when Tim shouted at him, he no longer reacted to a single word. Tim asked his father for forgiveness, asked him to give him another chance to prove his worth. He calmly answered him that it was not worth it, since for him personally it had no value. The most terrible and influential person in Tim's life has always been his father, who was influential for everyone and not only for Tim himself. The father had no hope for his son. He initially considered him a weakling, and nothing could change his decision, not even an ill-fated victory. All hope of rising in the eyes of his father disappeared from him, his eyes filled with emptiness in the same way as his fortitude. All efforts were in vain, all hopes for elevation before his father fell to the ground. Hope left him first, followed by everything else. Even if it was a real fight, even if Tim was pierced with a real blade, none of it would bring the same pain as the pain of disgust from such an influential person as his father. He was chilled to the point of trembling in his bones. He bowed his knees and did not stop trembling, as if one defeat stopped his life. Time passed more slowly for him. He suddenly cried out towards his opponent, as if victory would have made a difference. Behind the mask, the face of the opponent was not visible, who had deprived Tim of such a good opportunity to rise at least a little in front of his father. He grabbed him by the collar of his suit and began blaming him for all his failures. Tim was furious. His opponent was his pillow to vent his anger. He was ready to cut off his head. Our lover of winning does not allow his opponent to enjoy the victory and sends him to the floor with one blow. Tim is trying to improve himself so that his father is happy, and this freak stands between him and his father and prevents him from achieving his goal. His opponent paid in full for his impudence and received all he deserved. Tim tore off his abuser's mask for protection and continues to blame him for everything, like a real child. Screams, attempts, everything came from Tim. He cannot accept defeat with dignity. There is no other way to achieve his father's recognition. For Tim, this is no longer just a dream, but a real nightmare, since even in his memories, his main enemy turned out to be John, who haunts him even in oblivion. Again, Tim's screams and fears awoke. The one he never wanted to see again appeared in his dream. The dream turned into a real absurdity, and now he was an adult and met an adult John. He decided to look around, since nothing could be expected in this place. Everything was new to Tim. Now the stands are filled with the dead. They have driven him into a corner like cattle. He is surrounded. There is no hope of salvation, and only inevitable death awaits him around the darkest corner. Tim orders them not to approach, but it is unlikely that any of them will hear him. Each will reap his own peace and will not leave a living place on it. The lifeless bodies of the dead spun in a round dance, like dancing with the devil under the moon. By selling your soul weight, you get temporary bliss. A shudder ran through Tim. Fear permeated him completely. What he saw plunged him into horror. In the dream, John considered Tim only as food. He saw only food in front of him. Pinch Tim already, free him from this nightmare, show him the way out, since more than one person cannot withstand such pressure. Tim tried to push everyone and everything away, but it was unlikely that the mindless dead would listen to him, who violently attack and do not see obstacles in front of them. While the boss was sleeping, night had already fallen, and his nightmare caused him to shout to the entire bus, which disturbed all the passengers in the middle of the night. He woke up in a cold sweat, as if he had been doused with ice water, which pulled him out of the abyss of that nightmare. Everyone was surprised. No one could have expected Tim to wake up so suddenly. Clint and John are next to each other again, and they also decided to show their attention to Tim, who is having nightmares and will soon start cutting his teeth. The sixes ran up to their eldest and began to explain everything that happened to him while he was unconscious. They began to speculate on the cause of the collapse and pointed out that the foul aroma of dried blood from the van had caused Tim to pass out and fuel his dreams with nightmares. He grabbed his head. It was clearly in great pain, since the dream was truly terrible from beginning to end. A silhouette of his father from a deep past appeared in Tim's head, a past that appeared in his dreams and plunged him into even greater despair. He breathed a sigh of relief and said that his father would no longer do the same to him as he had done before. The night continued. The stars shone with small lamps, but could not outshine the moon with their light. They suddenly stopped and were ordered to hurry up and vacate their seats. Shaved continued to explain what happened while Tim was unconscious, and he said that all the women and children were hidden in a washed van, as it was safer. They stopped here to wait out the night and live until tomorrow, and for complete comfort they lit fires and began to warm themselves. In the dense forest it was not so gloomy, it was quite light, and the light from the fires provided not only this light, but also warmth and comfort in addition. The boy is getting worse and worse every second. The scar on his mother has healed, and the man is trying to ask for help. He asks to get some meat, but Clint instantly reacts to him with aggression. John no longer gives a damn about how Clint behaves. He is absolutely indifferent to his goal and does not see any obstacles. Clint is absolutely right, as he orders them to find a way to get the meat themselves and not endlessly hope for salvation from John and Clint. John's vision with Clint's blood gives him an incredible advantage, being able to see the body heat of his victims and know their location in advance. John gathers everyone who is dressed in bloody clothes, and apparently he is going to teach everyone to hunt and get food on their own. They were very surprised. They hoped for free help, and John was not a fool, and to prove that the men among the passengers were hunters and not cowards. John put forward the most correct solution, did not throw anyone overboard, but found a method to train everyone and avoid a lot of problems. It's unclear whether Clint is happy with this fair decision, but John is right, as he gave them the opportunity to prove their worth. Everyone else despaired as they were heavily criticized. Even if they were wrong, they certainly did not want to hunt. Tim and the shaved man glared at John, but still remained silent, as they were given the opportunity to feast on the animal's meat. The boy was already coughing a lot. His condition was getting worse and worse every minute. He urgently needed help. The man began to understand that his son urgently needed help, and it would be better for him to hurry up and get meat for the family, otherwise he would lose his offspring. He clenched his teeth. There were many contradictions in his head. He could not decide to hunt in the dark forest, but at the same time, he really wanted to feed his son and heal him. Nevertheless, he pulled himself together, gathered his fingers into a fist, and made up his mind to get meat for the family. John clearly knows how to manipulate people. He is good at creating contradictions for them, putting pressure on them and forcing them to dance to his tune. Everyone instantly gathered their courage, took their will into a fist, and headed after John. Clint, Michael, and Sam were very surprised by the activity of these hopeless people. They certainly could not expect such a reaction from them, but it was as if someone was holding them. Clint considers their behavior crazy, but Michael contradicts him because he believes that they should stick together. Tim remained silent again. His intention to survive had disappeared somewhere, or this was a trick to show his desperation. He decided to go with everyone. The shaved man tries to call him, but he doesn't seem to hear him. Those who participated in the hunt will receive the meat, and Tim's six understand this well and also decide to go after the boss. One of the survivors noticed something strange on his clothes. Something vaguely similar to a sticker or photograph was stuck to it. That picture caught Tim's attention. It reminded him of something familiar, as if he had seen it before. He decided to take her with him and check whether she really was familiar to him or just imagined it. The hero brought the bloody photo to his face. His reaction would tell him what was hidden on the other side. Still, the photo did not give him any pleasant emotions, but even frightened him, plunged him into shock. It covered his face with black silk. Another drop of sweat flows from his face. Nightmare after nightmare haunts Tim over and over again. Six noticed the boss's reaction. He decided to find out what happened to him and what kind of image in the photograph changed Tim's face so much. This photo is from Tim's childhood. It completely reflected the horror of his entire youth. Incredibly, the photo shows the ruler of City B, Tim's father and the pervert, because of whom that terrible night in Clint's life happened, when because of him Clint was crippled both mentally and physically. Clint suspected something, but not in vain, since they were talking very strangely and were definitely up to something. He snatched the photo from Tim's hands, which he didn't expect at all, whether Clint would be glad to see his hater. It is not for nothing that the photograph is stained with blood, since it reflects all the pain of those who have ever contacted that person in the photo. Still, it haunts me that the photograph was in the van in which the frightening creature was hiding and how it and the Wanderer are connected with City B. Is it true that it is a trap, and how soon will they get there? Clint's reaction is similar to Tim's, but he was much more shocked because his childhood nightmare turned out to be the father of his enemy. At that very second, images and memories of those events that Clint so wants to forget flashed into his head. Tim wants the photo back, but Clint doesn't want anyone other than his family and John to know about it, and immediately removes his hand from Tim. Tim was already furious. He bared his teeth, and he also wanted to take the photo for himself. But his anger passed. Clint's reaction made him scared. Even his strength left him. When Clint realized that this pervert was his father, he changed. He became a completely different person. His aura became much more overwhelming than before. Tim suspected in his gaze that perhaps he had connections with his father, and from the reaction he understood that they were not friendly. Shaved wants to avoid conflict and pulls the elder out of the conversation, inventing a reason for this. Six thinks Clint is truly creepy since he still hasn't taken his eyes off the photo. Clint had already pulled away from the crowd. He had lost all the mood to kill animals. He wanted to hide in the most secluded corner. He was finally able to tear himself away from the photograph, lowered his hand, and prepared to leave on the way back. He simply, silently, went to the camp with everyone. That photograph opened his old wounds and returned him again to his unhappy past. The night continued. The stars were not going to leave the sky and were shining with all their appearance. Michael and Sam stayed with Alice and Meg to warm themselves by the fire and talk about various topics. Alice asked them why they didn't go with everyone in search of meat. Sam explained everything by saying that Brother Zombie told them to stay and look after the girls. Meg noticed that Alice had a new prosthesis and asked her if she was in pain and what she felt like. John did his best, so to speak. He gave her the leg that Tim took from her. She smiled sweetly in response and said something that was very convenient, and she was grateful to him with all her heart for it. Clint came back. His hunt was over. He found something he didn't want to find. Alice turned her attention to him and decided to call him, since it was strange that he distanced himself from John and the entire squad. Michael also asked him why he was not hunting, what made him leave there. It was clear to everyone that Clint was not telling something. What kind of excitement he was talking about. What had happened to him. All these questions visited his head over and over again. Now he turned to Alice. What did he need from her? Since before he had never been able to exchange words with her, even greet her, which was hard for him. Clint started with a difficult topic for her, as if he knew all her motives in advance, and that she never wanted to end up in B-Town. She was excited after all. Clint hit the bull's eye when he asked such a tricky question. Clint understood the sad truth that John had to get along with people through desperation. In addition, Alice herself understands that when they reach the city they will have to part, and this can only be avoided if they turn off the path. Clint knows how to apply pressure to get the truth out of a person, but it feels like he already knew everything. He feigned a smile at her and pointed out to her that it would be better for them to stick together, but she already knew the solution to this problem. He spoke in riddles that only Alice could understand, because even if all the problems were solved, John would not stop helping all these people. Clint said everything that was stored in her head. It was not without reason that she agreed with Clint when he began to point out to all the passengers that they were a worthless burden. We returned to the forest at the very height of the hunt, and fortunately, everything around was already brighter, all the conditions for a successful hunt. Tim's gang was chasing a deer with doll eyes, but they don't care about any eyes. They want meat and only meat. Tim is not a fool and is already holding the tip of a stick and preparing it for an attack, just like I did in ancient times, when people hunted with spears and bladed weapons. His strength is incredible. Whether he trains and throws a spear so that he can always be ready for this moment, it is not the smartest or the strongest who survive, but the fittest. The spear hit the target and pierced the deer in the center of the belly. Now all he could do was run into the hot broth. Such a spectacular throw and such a ridiculous fall, Tim failed immediately after such a pathetic attack. Everyone immediately forgot about their eldest and rushed at the deer as if they had found a pot of gold under a rainbow. Still, the deer will kick to the end for its life and will do everything to escape from these greedy people. Sick shouts to Tim to quickly get up and run to the rescue in order to finish off this animal. The hunt is not so easy for them. Tim falls, but gets back to his feet in time to get his piece of meat. He grabs a large boulder. Apparently the deer's death will be quick, but not painless. The deer continues to kick, and Tim walks for a long time with his stone, but you can rely on the sixes, since they are able to hold one deer. In the eyes of a deer, as if nothing ever happened and will never happen, the eyes of a doll have a sweet appearance and complete defenselessness. Tim delivers the final blow to the deer and finishes it off, blood gushing out like a fountain in all directions. Still, Tim did his best. They realized that it was not in vain that they went hunting, since they were able to taste such delicious meat and did not even need to share it with anyone. The sixes praise their eldest for the beautiful murder and offer not to share this delicious meat with anyone. Shaved still can't believe that John was able to survive and also became a reasonable zombie, and all the problems are because of him. If it weren't for him, they wouldn't have gone down like this. They can't trust John and want to escape in their van, replacing the wreck with a nicer car. The sixes do not have time to finish chewing, but chatter constantly. Only Tim remains silent while he eats and enjoys every piece of food he gets. Still, the six are itching, and he needs to ask Tim a tricky question about the photograph they met on the eve of the hunt. That photo was in the truck where that creature was sitting, and the six noticed it well since it was very important information. Tim pushed his subordinate away, since he did not like such information, yet all the memories with him were very terrible. Tim agreed with the plan, but the discussion of the photographs asks to be postponed, and perhaps for a long time. Tim has already made up his mind. His eyes are filled with confidence, and he is ready to crush them. How on time John arrived at such an interesting conversation, he considers Tim a real person of any kind of fear. All their faces changed dramatically. John destroyed their entire plan at the stage of its discussion and eliminated it at the root. Soon John will have the joy of catching Tim in the midst of executing a plan. He is about to lower Tim from the moon to Earth and grabs him by the collar to show him where the crayfish spend the winter. In addition, he asks to compose a song about everything that has been said and to perform it in tears so that he can listen to this symphony. Again and again his plan fails and he can't finish it, as John catches him at the most inconvenient moment and chops him down, stopping them. John will not even let him reach the camp in peace. He will do everything himself and drag him to the people on his own. Finally they returned. The entire fleet was in place. Every car was in place as it was. John throws Tim to the ground and clearly shows him his place. He must not leave the camp even a meter. He is distracted by shouts from the side. People are worried, and someone is trying to calm them down. What happened during the absence of John and the gang? Why is everyone so scared? They clutch their heads and shout that the city is occupied, and there is no longer any salvation for them. Tim was pierced by new information that they would not be able to make it, and perhaps his reaction was connected with his father. On the radio, they say that the city is under attack by someone, and there is rustling noise due to interference. Such news is the worst for all survivors. Tim crawled on all fours and could not believe that the city was no more. including his father. He was greatly shocked by this news, as if the sky had fallen right on him, as if he had fallen off a cliff into an endless abyss and fell endlessly, losing all hope, even of death. In his mind, the city was burning, and his father and the city were like a log in the middle of the wood chips. He is very worried. He cannot believe that such an influential man as his father simply allowed his own city to be occupied. Tim is in complete denial that his father could be dead. Even if he died in his arms, he would constantly refuse to accept it. The image of his father popped up in his head more and more often, as if his father was next to him every day. Tim could not deny the power of his father, and his thoughts made it clear that the ruler could never allow his city to be occupied. People could not know about the power of that man and had completely lost hope of survival. Clint explains to everyone that it is too early to give up hope, and the problem is that the radio works with interference, and they do not know the full information. Because it all happened so quickly, almost instantly, that was all Clint could write down. It turns out that Clint was not the only one who heard this information and remembered Alice as if this was all their plan to avoid getting into the city. Based on her reaction, everything is clear. It is definitely connected with Clint's plan. But is it true that the city was occupied? The sister had her say. She confirmed Clint's words. Her words should have made John forget about the decision to go to the city. There was no joy in her. She completely sank, as if such a sweet little girl had lost all hope. She jumped on John and told him to never think about going into the city again. John seemed to suspect something. Meg's reaction seemed strange to him, as if she was doing all this feignedly. The reactions of the people were sincere, since they were already completely confident that the city no longer existed, which means that the last salvation had left the horizon. There was even a crybaby among the people. Someone was deeply struck by despair, which plunged him into the abyss. Fate hurts Tim from time to time, whether it punishes him for what he has done all the time or whether unfortunate events came together at the same time. He was incredibly angry at everything that was happening. The death of his father and the destruction of the city. He became John's hostage. All the worst things happened at the most inconvenient time, and he would not be able to find a solution to this anytime soon. By the same time, night had already fallen. It was time for everyone to go to bed, but the news did not allow us to relax for a second. People already easily obtained food as if it was always at hand. They just had to open their eyes slightly. Still, the destruction of the city bore fruit. Such power gave Tim at least a chance to stay among the survivors, but now for them he has become an outcast. The impudent people decided that the city no longer exists, which means that Tim is now an entry ticket that has expired and has no value. Even a small crumb is very difficult for Tim, but now he doesn't even have those connections. Now he's not even a nobody with a capital letter. He has completely exhausted all his strength, and they are also throwing him in different directions, like a ball on a football field. They decided to take even the last hair from Tim's hands, otherwise he would be sent to hell. The only ones who remained on his side were only his team and subordinates. Only they were always faithful to him. Only they were from the very beginning and will be until the very end. They despair, but do not give up. This is not the first time for them to lose meat and give it to those insolent people. They understood the reason for this attitude, since the city was occupied, which meant Tim lost his last trump card, and besides, the entire conversation was heard by Clint, who was standing nearby. John, as always, is there and more than ever on time. He caught Clint spying on Tim, and it was not without reason that he thought it strange. Clint doesn't know how to lie and points out that John is a real spy, as he approached without making a single sound. Blonde understands that the situation is the worst. People are desperate, the city is destroyed, and the desire to look for food is getting weaker and weaker each time. John still insists on continuing towards the city, even if there is no hope at all. John explains everything by saying that with every kilometer traveled, there are more zombies and less food. John's words are confirmed by the fact that children and adults were starving and hoping that today they would be able to taste a piece of meat. The city is quite large, and you should not lose the chance to visit it since they have already come a long way, and it would be a mistake to stop there. Clint is clearly not happy with his decision. His plan is not working. No matter how much he wants to tell John that he should stop, he does not hear a single word. Tim seems to have noticed the strangers who have been looming for quite some time and listening to their entire conversation. Shaved and Tim noticed them. The two gangs are plotting around each other. Clint realized that it was too crowded here, and it was worth finding a secluded place to talk with important information, since an extra word and all further actions would be in vain. Clint points out the truth that people can constantly circle around John with his abilities. John does not like this truth, and he remained silent. He was able to squeeze those words out of John. He won't be able to defend them forever. He means Alice and Meg, whom he will leave on Clint's shoulders. Clint was shocked by John's words, as he understood the consequences that would happen after John left them. Nothing will influence John's decision. In any case, he will leave everything to Clint. So to speak, he will leave a legacy. Clint is simply furious. He will not allow John to do whatever he wants and began to yell at him at the top of his voice. He doesn't like the way John thinks. He believes that the consequences will be irreversible. Tim and his whole gang will not allow his girls to live in peace. They will always intrigue and bother in any way possible. Now everything is clear. John did not try to bring up something fair in Tim. All his actions were only for profit, and he is alive only because there is still hope for the city. John is not so stupid as to give a potential killer free rein to kill everyone in his path and feed everyone with the meat of the dead. Tim hears the entire conversation. Now all the cards are revealed to him. All he has to do is run, since he is already digging his own grave by still being here. Tim's father is the ruler of the city, and he can give them the opportunity to enter the city without any problems. He can't do without mistrust, but he needs to use it as a free ticket into town. Tim is terribly angry with John. His show of justice and mercy was just a mask. In fact, John is hypocritical for the sake of profit. Tim is only John's ace up his sleeve as long as he is confident that the city still exists. Tim would be very valuable in the city, and could easily be traded for a quiet stay in his city. But Clint was just as scared by John's words as they were by Tim. John is confident that Tim will always follow him and will not leave him alone even outside the city. He has the right to live only when people's lives are in complete peace and protection. Only one deviation from the condition, but he will not be able to come to an agreement, and something very bad will definitely not be avoided. John puts his hand on Clint's shoulder and makes him a real promise that he will definitely keep. He swears that he will end Tim's life with his own hands if there is something in his agreement that does not suit him. Just one hitch, and he will deprive him of his neck. Tim was very frightened because his words were sincere. He was determined, but he believed in his justice. He believed that his life would be safe. The weather completely reflects Tim's well-being. Now all the elements are raging in him. He has one foot in the grave, on the edge of a knife. Tim is running away from here. There is no longer any purpose for him to stay here. His face was covered in shadow, as if a black veil was covering him, as if every second was killing him. Even bumps and stones do not give him a chance to escape from this unfortunate place. Everything is against him. Every centimeter is permeated with danger for him. Tim absurdly falls into a puddle of mud. He is already all worn out, exhausted and weak, but everything around him finishes him off. His fearlessness disappears with every minute. Out of rage, he grabs the dirt with his hands, and his hand begins to shake. His fear knows no bounds. Failure after failure pursues him, as if lightning will strike him any minute. Tim will not allow himself to be offended in any case, but these are just his words. He is weak in comparison with John and the others. He can only run. Still, they won't let him safely escape and escape. Clint overtook him at the most unnecessary moment. Clint understood that Tim had heard the entire conversation, indicating that Tim himself was already lying in a grave that just needed to be buried and left forever. Does it make sense for Tim to continue to fight? Will he have a chance to escape? Will he see a bright future? Tim wanted to grab Clint's leg, but he was faster and removed it instantly. Clint was amazed by Tim's fortitude. Even now, he was climbing the slope of the abyss. No matter how high its peak was, he climbed higher and higher. The obstacles that fate gave him, he passed with ease. Only now he was overtaken by a dead end. He bared his teeth at all his enemies, no matter how strong they were, no matter how dangerous. He always showed his fangs and claws just to survive. He rises further. No matter what bumps there are, he will get up. Tim pounced on Clint. His strength never left him. His adrenaline was constantly pumping. Clint thinks he's stupid. Even if he was the most fearless, he's very stupid. Tim's pressure is stopped by one unfortunate umbrella, which turned out to be another obstacle. The grin doesn't leave Clint's face. He's ready to solve it at every moment and will always find a solution for it. Tim clearly did not expect such a move. He attacked first and will fall first. His methods of fighting are useless. He was pierced again, as once upon a time, a long time ago, the enemy's rapier did not allow Tim to win the battle, and now he was pierced with an umbrella. He no longer fights strategically. He fights thoughtlessly, simply throwing himself at the enemy, becoming cannon fodder. Again he fell. Every enemy of his brought him to his knees. He was never strong enough, no matter how hard he tried. Clint no longer had the same rage towards him. All he wanted was to punish him. He never enjoyed it. He already with force steps on Tim's head and shows him to his place, since he cannot take his side to stop John. Even Clint cannot convince John. He feels compassion for Tim, but cannot help him. He can only hurt John and mentions people eating zombie meat, with the intention of using them against John. Tim is already empty inside, but now Clint humiliates him. Even fate, which was previously favorable to him, has turned its back on him. Clint is going to use him to stop John. Even Tim's gang will be part of his plan. He hints to him that he better find a good way to say goodbye to his people, since soon he will no longer be the boss, and his 6 people will no longer be people. Drops of rain were dripping on him. He had already fallen face first into the mud. There was no way to help him. The situation was one of the worst for him. The rain continued to pour in buckets, spilling tens, hundreds of thousands of drops of pure water onto the treetops. Tim will not be swayed by the words of some people. He always finds the positive in things, a true optimist whom one can only envy for his willpower. Even now he stood up and showed all his hefty strength. Even now he spits in the faces of Clint and John. Even now he laughs at their every word, even if he is already a winner. He is already laughing like a crazy person who is determined to win, even if he is not destined to survive. He will take a dozen like John with him. He will die. Everyone will die after him. He is a suicide bomber who will take him with him to the guardian of the scales, and it will be he who will decide who will go where. The rain stopped along with Tim's madness. The sky became completely clear and reflected that things were getting a little better. John tries very hard to help his beloved, whether it's all for the sake of leaving without any regret or genuine concern. The prosthesis is getting better and better. Now the bones will become a strong support. The prosthesis has become like a full-fledged leg. Clint pokes him with his umbrella and points out that he is as interested in the prosthesis as a child is with a toy, and spends the whole day with it. He asks him to fix the umbrella since it has been broken for a long time, and he is just doing other things. Clint opened the umbrella and showed its condition. Now it is like a sieve and allows moisture to pass through much better than before. The umbrella has become truly useless. You can see everything through it, no need. John came up with something brilliant at that very second. He would not restore its previous properties. He would add new ones. So simple and ingenious, he took a certain bone and placed it at the tip of the umbrella. Now Clint is a warrior with an umbrella. He really liked his work. A new weapon in their times was an irreplaceable gift. John interrupted him and grabbed his hand, as his stupidity could lead to bad consequences. He instructs him to never allow himself to get hurt on this bone, since it could become his last weapon. Still, Clint was distracted by shouts from the side. Someone was very indignant at the expense of someone. A kind grandmother was sharing food with a young boy, and a man behind was yelling at her as she was handing out food. Clint finally realized that these people are also capable of helping a friend and comrade. John points out that people tend to express their feelings more strongly when they're having a hard time when they should have been given a chance. He is very glad that they are still human, and their humanity makes them much stronger than all the dead. Even Clint was curious about where all this would lead. John did a good experiment and showed Clint what kind of people all these survivors could become. When Clint becomes interested, he twirls his white silky hair and begins to wonder if sometimes he really is wrong. The eyes are filled with interest, as if every burden began to disappear, and useful people came to replace them, capable of at least something. But the thought of what Tim would do did not give him peace of mind about how far this could all go. It's a clear, sunny morning. Birds are soaring into the sky, but looking at the sky, you can never say that the walking dead are roaming the paths. The rain left a heap of dew on the grass. The ground was damp and there were small puddles on it, which were seas and oceans for the small inhabitants. And suddenly, a zombie attack in the middle of the forest. Someone can no longer save his hand. The dead man has already sunk his sharp fangs under the skin. The shaved man turned out to be the victim of another dead man, and someone is ready to come to the rescue and cut off his hand before it's too late. The shovel pierced the skin, flesh, and bones. Part of the arm ended up on the other side. They did not leave the dead man unattended and hit him on the head with a large stone so that he would not get up for the second time. His head fell to the ground and created a large puddle of scarlet blood. Finally, he was completely dead. Shaven is grateful to his comrades for being able to save him and cutting off his hand in time. Six turned back with a kind of questioning look, as if someone was walking behind him. That stranger became their eldest. Tim returned to them and everything around them began to shine. Tim was glad to see them, since they are the only bros he has to whom he can always say whatever he wants. They are always ready to come up with a new plan to escape. They are definitely positive. Tim grabs the fat man by the cheeks and asks his bros to calm down, since his plan will not lead them to survival, but will take all the offenders with him. After arriving, they would no longer be afraid of John. He was completely confident in his words. What gave him such confidence? His plans include becoming hundreds of times stronger than that rotten creature that is capable of fighting irrationally. For Tim, John is just a toy that they will chop off his head at any opportunity. The others did not understand Tim's intentions. He seemed to have gone mad, and this alarmed them. He laughed terribly, like a real villain, before contemplating a new evil plan. At the same time, John eats delicious meat, which is very surprising for him. Clint, who caught him doing this, was also surprised, whether he was happy or disappointed, but he was definitely stunned. He enjoyed his food, licking his fingers as if he were eating some delicacy. Even if there is little food, they will continue on their way as soon as everyone is gathered and ready to move out. Michael shouts to everyone that someone is returning. Apparently, John had already warned him and forced him to watch for everyone to come. Silhouettes like shadows made their way through the thicket of the forest, and apparently everything was assembled. We could go. They were dragging raw meat, which would soon be eaten since many of the survivors were hungry. Tim and the whole gang were the last to return to camp and delayed everyone greatly. Nobody was happy with them, since they hoped more that they had long since died and left this world. That same impudent man again shows his greedy nature. Even now he wants to take the last piece of meat, but will he be very surprised to find out whose meat it is? Everyone decided to support the man and insisted that they give up the meat and, out of quiet sadness, go into another world, since there was nothing to eat anyway. Tim didn't care what these people said. His goal was to end it all, even at the cost of his life. Tim's indifference seemed impudent to the man, and he immediately rushed into battle for a piece of the dead man's meat. Tim grabbed him by the collar and made it clear to him to get out before it was too late. There was not a drop of fear in him, only an insane thirst to kill everyone here, take everyone's life and gnaw their bones. The man immediately learned his lesson, like the smartest student, and stopped being insolent to just anyone. John noticed this and instantly decided to stop him, but Clint was faster and stopped John. Clint pointed out to him a more important problem, which was lurking in that part of the forest, and it was there that there was a lot of zombie activity, which could become an even bigger problem. Still, that's where we'll have to go, and it would be better to solve this problem. But in the meantime, Tim and the whole gang made their way into the van with zombie meat, and their plan began to take effect. Tim looked around and probably suspected something in Clint's behavior. He clearly pointed out the problem and instructed him to use his eye. John refused such help and decided to go on his own and explore everything. Afterwards, John ordered to be here until he returns, and then they will go to the city. Clint thought with some confusion that his eye began to see worse. What did he mean? Everyone was already getting ready and taking their places, and John went to explore the forest and solve the problem. The rest were already returning to the camp, and from their running, it was clear that they had brought a lot of booty. They brought a lot of meat to the camp, and for Clint this means only one thing, that he can begin his plan. Those who returned said that something was wrong with their condition, and they should hurry to their seats on the bus. The voices of the sixes could be heard from the van, and this gave them away. Tim looked through the crack of the doors, and was on guard so that no one would come in or see what they were doing. Six touched Tim's shoulder, and apparently they had already come to terms with what they would have to do for the sake of their boss. They no longer wanted to suffer and came to only one way out of this situation. They decided to eat raw zombie meat in order to help Tim take revenge with their sacrifice and take a couple of lives of the offenders themselves. Tim could not even think that his comrades would so decisively go to death for his sake. He did not even dare to mention such a thing. Such devotion could even make him feel, and he was able to say that they were not obliged to eat this meat for his sake. Shaved was already more determined than ever. Nothing would stop him. He grabbed his boss's shoulder and gave him the opportunity to trust. Everything was great for him. This is exactly how he wanted to die for his boss, for his elder. Even if from the outside they look like a gang of student hooligans, their members are the most loyal and honest with each other. He clenched his fist so tightly that his whole hand began to shake, because every word from his mouth was the truth, a dogma that you just had to believe in. They understood why Tim became such a cruel and evil person. The tears of the shaved man broke through Tim. He was in shock, because he did not expect such fortitude from all of them. Tim became so angry because he wanted to save them, to save his reliable people, and he did not dare to lose them, since no best family could even replace their devotion. Everyone in the car began to cry like children, but everyone made an adult male decision, which they came to the very second they came to thinking. Suddenly, even now, Tim was plunged into memories of winter, of a cold white blanket, of strong storms and the terrible beginning of the apocalypse. To get food in such cold weather, one had to try very hard and even climb the slopes for the sake of one berry. Back then, Tim wasn't so long-haired. He shivered from the cold and obtained food with blood and sweat. Still, one wrong movement and all the efforts were in vain, as if he had lost more strength than he had gained. That same scar appeared all over his face after such an unexpected blow on an icy slope. He put himself in mortal danger just to get some provisions and enable himself and others to survive. He fell again into the cold snow. The attempt was in vain. The hope of survival smoldered like the last cigarette for a smoker. He had no choice but to die among the ice and become an ice statue. They were so hungry that they couldn't even make a move. Only Tim didn't give up and fought with fate equally. Even now he did not allow others to give up, but hunger drowned them out completely, and the eternal frost left no chance to rise and warm up. He could not believe that they were able to escape from the crowds of the dead, and now they would die from ill-fated hunger. His voice was very pained, but his only desire was to save his brothers. He was at a dead end. There was no food nearby. There was severe frost everywhere, and crowds of zombies were roaming. There was no mercy from this world. Even the fat man lost weight, but he really wanted meat, any meat. He would taste even the most disgusting meat. They wanted meat. Even if it was impossible to get, Tim always tried to find a loophole. He rummaged everywhere, but there were only fresh zombie corpses around, but he never stopped trying for the sake of his people. The dead were everywhere, as if an anthill had poured out of them straight onto the ground, and now their lifeless bodies lay with empty eyes. Tim thought that this was the solution, the dead as a substitute for meat to fill the empty stomachs of his bros. He lit a fire and was ready to cook dinner for everyone, which would temporarily postpone the inevitable death of his comrades. Everyone greedily devoured the meat and could not believe that Tim was able to find the only salvation for them, meat, which was once in abundance, but now they have to fight just to take a bite. Shaved with disbelief decided to ask Tim about the meat, which he had not even tasted. Tim understood his guilt, but he simply could not do otherwise because he would have lost his comrades on the same day. Now the most important thing is survival, and then we can discuss this meat. They cried like children, but they proved their devotion, and they are Tim's true and only friends. Warm feelings awakened in Tim. He was touched to the very depths, as if a ray of sunshine broke through in the deepest cavity. They freed Tim and decided not to bother him with eating the meat. After all, at that time he breathed life into them and made them see even more bright moments. The first bite of fresh dead meat will entail a lot of problems. Now nothing can be brought back. Everyone thanked Tim at once and began to greedily eat the meat, since it was the last thing they would eat before the transformation. He felt enormous guilt for everything he had done. He did not know how to atone for it all. Even his death would not cost as much as he owed. Then he only pretended to eat zombie meat to convince them that the meat was safe. He obviously wanted to say something. It was on the tip of his tongue, but the lump in his throat did not allow him to say a word. Then he could not tell them about that meat, since they would have died of hunger and would not even have lived to see these days. He is a complete liar. He lied to them constantly, and they were always sincere with him. This is it, the beginning of Clint's plan. He locks everyone inside along with Tim so that he can be eaten in addition. He closes them from the inside so that the last ticket to the city will die among the dead. Tim noticed a strange click outside. Now even he has no hope of survival. Before their death, Clint even remembers to laugh at them and calls their actions cute. These dogs are ready to give their lives for their stupid owner. That's exactly how Clint spoke about them. The last click and movement of the hand and everything that was in this van will remain in this van. Hunting has already become a favorite place for survivors, but hunting for John means killing hundreds of monsters to the sound of their screams. Another dead man attacks again and again without even thinking about who is standing in front of him. With one flick of the finger, the insane creature is decapitated and sent to hell. The monster fell, but Clint didn't lie. This place really isn't calm. Everyone was defeated. The forest was filled with silence. Only the rustling of leaves gave life to this place. But still, there were far fewer zombies here than John might have thought, which is exactly what he was surprised by. He remembered everything Clint had told him before he sent him here to scout. He was confused as to why Clint sent him here since there wasn't much activity here. In addition, that strange smile on his face, all this haunted John since everything in Clint's actions was unusual and for good reason. Suddenly, everything became clear to him. His eyes opened wider. He finally understood everything, and he should hurry up. Still, Clint's plan went as he wanted, as if he knew all the actions in advance and was 10 steps ahead. Screams could be heard from the car. They begged to be let out, and Clint stood and pretended that nothing had happened. They tried to extract from him what he had in mind, but received silence in response. There were many eyewitnesses around, but Clint didn't care. He calmly left there with a pure soul. He took his mother by the hand and was already dragging her onto the bus, ordering everyone to take their seats as they were moving out. The mother decided to ask her beloved son where they were going, and he asked not to ask unnecessary questions and just go. They shouted after them, but it's unlikely that anyone will hear them, since they definitely have no more salvation. Clint called out to Alice, and she instantly responded with surprise. He ordered her to take Meg with her and take their seats so that they could leave. She clearly follows Clint's plan, takes her sister by the hand, and she obediently obeys her. They heard this noise and rumble from the truck, but they were not going to do anything, but only go and follow Clint's instructions, since it was very beneficial for them. Screams, roars, and screams came from the car, but everyone had to hurry up and become passengers on the bus. Everyone was disturbed by the roar from the car, and they wondered what was there and what was hidden in it. Nobody understood where they were going and began to be indignant about it. They put forward the right thoughts about waiting for John, but none of this was part of Clint's plan, so no one will hear this guy. Clint makes it clear that they better go quickly, otherwise their flight will end and they will not go anywhere. The man was indignant, but could not contradict him, as he would have lost his rightful place. But he was also haunted by the truck with its screams and roar. What was in it? Such questions were circling in his skull. Nevertheless, they decided to follow him. Since they have no other way, he will abandon them at any convenient opportunity. First, they all have to come in, and later they will talk about everything that is tormenting their head. Clint sometimes glanced at the truck, something that brought him discomfort. The screams continued. No one could shut them up from the inside. But what was also frightening was what could come out of there in the end. Clint glanced at the ignition button and clearly decided to hit the road so that John wouldn't catch up with him. He pressed the button too sharply and too hard. Now he must take full responsibility for the consequences in the future. Old men and women were left out. There were no places for them, they were late. Clint is not going to feel sorry for anyone. To enter the bus, you need a ticket. They didn't have one, which means such passengers cannot even be present in the baggage area. He grinned brazenly and made an arrogant grimace to prove his cruel intentions. Clint orders Sam to head towards John. He definitely didn't want to get into the city and killed Tim for this. All those who dropped out ran after the bus, but it turned out to be faster than them, and soon they would leave the horizon. They fell, screamed, and asked to come back, but Clint in the driver's seat didn't hear a damn thing, of course, on purpose. The last hope fled and left behind a cloud of dust. Clint is too cruel a ruler to be merciful. The truck was too dangerous for them, since it contained the biggest danger for them, zombies that would devour them. Tim kicked the door with all his might, but it was too strong for him. He was surrounded. The guys would soon become mindless monsters, and the door was locked from the outside. He tried to get out, investing all his remaining strength. He fought against this ill-fated door like a monster. He wanted to open access to survival for himself. The boss was in despair, but tried to find a way out of this situation. He was like an experimental mouse that was locked in 4 walls with predators. He hit the door over and over again, but it was all in vain. There was no longer a chance for him to get out. He could only resign himself to fate. No one heard all the screams and calls. No one cared that there was still a person among the dead who would eat him, or, even worse, infect him. Although he could be heard, no one would save him in such a hopeless situation. He is only one among the bros. Whether everything is over for him, only his determination can help him, since only it will give him the strength and energy to fight again. Tim was trembling with fear, but he knew that he could not die, and he would definitely prove it. At the same time, the guys had already transformed. Their eyes shone like candles in a temple with a grin like the devil. They were already ready to kill Tim. Fear filled Tim with adrenaline, but chilled his body, as incredibly dangerous creatures stood behind him, from whom nothing could be expected. But he couldn't die today. He had to take revenge and grab the handle of the knife to finish off his boys. They had already become brutal. All that remained was to kill them, since it was either him or him. That's how natural selection was. But Tim should not face death yet. He still needs to take revenge on many people, and now it is too early for him to die. Someone was quickly rushing past tree trunks and creating a whistle from their speed. It turns out that John was already rushing towards the camp, because he was sure that Clint was up to something, and he turned out to be absolutely right. He fought his way through trees and bushes, knocking down everything in his path to stop Clint, since he had been acting strange lately. He was eager to find out what his friend Clint was up to, who decided to distract him and go in his direction. The bus was racing at full speed, at such a speed it would be difficult to catch up with it if it was also constantly on the move. Alice grabbed Clint's hand and wanted to force him to return in order to take those people before it was too late, since he could not do this to them. This plan was very difficult for Clint, and there was no way he could sacrifice it for the sake of some people. She believes that Clint takes on too much, since he had to distract John in order to get rid of them. He was definitely furious after her words. If she hadn't been John's beloved, she would definitely have been in trouble. He was very tired of listening to nonsense from John.